What if I told you that one of boxing's most respected champions was living a secret life that stretched across 5 countries and 5 wedding rings? To the public, Archie Moore was boxing royalty, a master technician, a record-setting champion, even a mentor to Muhammad Ali. But behind the scenes, he was juggling 5 wives, at least 7 known children, and promises he could never keep. And when those lives finally collided, the fallout was explosive. Court cases, betrayals, a scandal that nearly destroyed everything he built. What finally exposed the truth, and why was it buried for so long? Stick around to find out exactly how a legend built this web of secrets and how it all began in the shadows long before the world knew his name.
The great fighters before me were so awesome. And I was a youth, but I wasn't really that afraid, because you have to get your feet wet before you learn how to swim.
Archie Moore's journey didn't start in a boxing ring or under the bright lights of an arena. It started in the muddy fields of Benoit, Mississippi in 1913, or maybe 1916, depending on whether you believe his mother or the man himself. Moore was rewriting details about his life long before he ever entered the spotlight. Even his birthday was part of the myth, one of his first tricks, and not his last, to keep people guessing about his age. His real name was Archibald Lee Wright. His father vanished early, his mother struggled, and before long, Archie and his sister Rachel were shipped off to St. Louis to live with relatives. That's where he picked up the name Moore and a few hard lessons about survival. Because in that city, nobody handed you anything, not even love. Tragedy followed him like a shadow. His sister died young, and his uncle, the only real father figure he had, passed soon after. And just like that, Archie was a kid with no compass and no safety net, stuck in a city that didn't care if he made it or not. He was hungry, not just for food, but for something to cling to. One freezing winter, desperate and cold, he broke into a local gym and stole a pair of boxing gloves. That one act of desperation didn't just get him arrested, it changed the entire course of his life. He was thrown into the Missouri Training School in Boonville, a reformatory for boys. You'd think a place like that would crush a kid. And for most boys, it did. But Archie wasn't most boys. The reformatory was rough, cold beds, tougher guards, and no sympathy. But buried in all that concrete and punishment was a boxing program. And one guard, maybe out of boredom or maybe because he saw something, handed Archie a pair of gloves, not to punish him this time, but to train him. That moment changed everything. In that cramped, dim-lit gym, Archie learned how to fight with purpose. He found something he never had before: structure, rules, a fight he could actually win. For the first time, pain had a purpose, and he liked the way that felt. When he got out, Archie didn't waste time drifting. He signed up for the Civilian Conservation Corps in 1933, working sunrise to sunset, laying roads and planting trees. But every spare second was for boxing. He organized matches, trained with anyone who'd step up, and turned those remote outposts into his own makeshift training ground. Those years were hard, but they built him up, physically and mentally. He learned to take punishment without folding, to stay calm in chaos, and to turn pain into fuel. He didn't know it yet, but that same mindset, the discipline, the secrecy, the relentless forward motion, would follow him outside the ring too, in ways no one was ready for. By the time he turned pro, Moore knew nothing would come easy, especially for a black fighter in the 1930s. Champions ducked him, promoters ignored him, so he hit the road, taking whatever fights he could get in small towns, empty gyms, and smoky halls across the Midwest. The money was trash, the crowds were thin, but he never stopped showing up. The system was stacked against him, and he knew it. Instead of letting it break him, Moore used it as fuel. He fought the best of the best, often facing other avoided contenders. And each bout added to the quiet buzz around his name. What made him different wasn't just his skill, it was his stubbornness. He'd been counted out since childhood, so he stopped caring what anyone thought. He fought for something bigger than belts, respect, for himself, for every kid who ever felt invisible. And as he racked up wins, he started to build a reputation that even the most reluctant promoters couldn't ignore. But Archie's life was never just about the ring. Years on the road taught him how to disappear, how to move city to city, dodge questions, and keep his private life out of sight. That ability to live unseen, honed in the shadows of his youth, became one of his greatest weapons in ways nobody could have predicted. As Moore's journey carried him from forgotten gyms to bigger crowds, his legend began to grow. He was tough, resourceful, and always just a little bit mysterious. The same traits that made him dangerous in the ring made it easy for him to keep secrets outside of it. But the higher he climbed, the harder it became to keep the truth buried. Moore's greatness wasn't just in the numbers, though 131 knockouts, the most in boxing history, speaks for itself. It was how he crafted his legend, managing his image with the same precision he used in the ring. He understood early that perception mattered, so he started bending facts, shaving years off his age, telling reporters he was born in 1916, not 1913. It wasn't vanity, it was strategy, a calculated move to make his long career seem even more miraculous. By 1952, Moore finally got his shot at the light heavyweight championship. His opponent, Joey Maxim, was younger, but Moore's patience and experience paid off. Over 15 rounds, he outboxed Maxim and won by unanimous decision. He held the title for nearly a decade, from 1952 to 1962, the longest reign in light heavyweight history. During that time, he defended it 9 times, often against faster, younger challengers, but rarely smarter ones. Moore's style was built on misdirection. His turtle defense made him a frustrating target, arms tucked, gloves tight, waiting to strike. He let opponents tire themselves out, then picked them apart with sharp counters. Outside the ring, he did the same, feeding the media tales of secret training methods, ballet for balance, mysterious diets, routines he claimed were borrowed from indigenous cultures. True or not, it didn't matter. It fueled the myth, and he was more than happy to provide one. But one belt wasn't enough. The heavyweight title was the real prize. In 1955, he got his shot against the undefeated Rocky Marciano. Moore shocked the world by flooring him in round 2, one of only 2 men to ever do it. For a moment, it looked like history might be rewritten, but Marciano rose, rallied, and stopped Moore in the 9th. Even in defeat, Moore's legend grew. He'd pushed Marciano further than almost anyone else. A year later, he tried again, this time against Floyd Patterson for the vacant heavyweight crown. Patterson was younger, faster, and relentless, and Moore couldn't keep up. The fight ended in 5 rounds, and with it, his dream of heavyweight glory. Still, nobody could question his place in boxing history. By the time he retired in 1963, Moore had fought 9 world champions, 7 Hall of Famers, and knocked out more opponents than anyone before or since. The Ring magazine ranked him among the greatest punchers of all time. Yet for all the headlines and honors, Moore's greatest trick wasn't in the ring. It was what he managed to hide outside of it. To the world, he was the wise, ageless champion. Calm, disciplined, always in control. But that image was just another tactic, refined and rehearsed like any fight plan. The discipline he used to protect himself in the ring also helped him conceal a private life that was far messier than anyone realized. And as the applause followed him from city to city, the real question was how he kept the truth from catching him outside of it. Archie Moore's personal life was as unpredictable as his ring tactics, and just as hard to track. While fans admired the wise, quotable champion, few knew he was quietly building a web of relationships that spanned continents and confusion and broken promises in their wake. It started in 1940 when Moore married Mattie Chapman. But before the ink on their marriage certificate was dry, he was gone, off to Australia chasing fights and a paycheck. Within a year, he was back in the States, recovering from surgery for a perforated ulcer. Mattie was filing for divorce. The marriage barely lasted a round. and it was the first sign that Archie Moore was a man who could never stay in one place or with one person for long. That first failed marriage set a pattern Moore would repeat. Between 1940 and 1952, he married 4 times, each one collapsing under the weight of endless travel and a career that never stayed still. The details blur across continents and arenas, but the ending was always the same. Moore moved on, and another family was left behind. By the 50s, as his fame grew, so did the wreckage. His personal life had become a patchwork of marriages, separations, and children scattered across different homes. Moore kept it all guarded, rarely even confiding in friends. It wasn't just secrecy, it was survival. In a world without social media or digital records, he could drift between lives without leaving much of a trail. But even then, the truth had a way of catching up. One ex-wife only learned she wasn't the only Mrs. Moore when the divorce papers listed alimony payments she'd never heard of. He'd been living a double life for years, and the walls were starting to close in. In his early years, the pay was low, but the bills weren't. Court settlements, alimony, child support, it all added up, fast. And when the purses finally got bigger, so did the demands on his wallet. The more he won, the more complicated things became. By the 60s, the cracks started to show. Legal disputes piled up, and the story of Moore's secret marriages began to leak into the public record. Court documents in California exposed the truth. Moore had been married to multiple women across different countries, sometimes at the same time. Even his closest friends were stunned. The press, always eager for scandal, jumped on it. The image of the disciplined, ageless champion was suddenly clouded by betrayal and lawsuits crossing international borders. One ex-wife, blindsided by the news of Moore's other marriages, described the shock of learning she wasn't the only Mrs. Moore. The story was messy, and it shook the myth. Moore's fans, once in awe of his poise and wisdom, now had to ask a harder question. How much of it was real, and how much was just performance? Not every chapter ended in chaos. In 1956, Moore married Joan Hardy, and this time, it stuck. The marriage lasted over 40 years, right up until his death in 1998. With Joan, Moore finally found the stability that had always escaped him. Together, they raised a large, blended family, 5 biological children, 2 from a previous marriage, and an adopted son. For the first time, Moore seemed to settle into a life that didn't demand constant reinvention. But even stability couldn't bury the past. Decades after his death, paternity claims continued to surface, each one a reminder of just how many parts of Moore's life remained hidden. Even as he became a respected father and husband in his later years, the questions about his past never fully faded. His story was no longer just about what he accomplished in the ring, but about the tangled legacy he left behind. The ability to compartmentalize his life was both his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. The same discipline that made him a champion helped him hide the truth for decades. But when the mask finally slipped, Moore found himself in a fight his gloves couldn't fix. For Archie Moore, rebuilding a legacy wasn't about erasing the past. It was about making sure his future looked different. After the headlines faded and the legal dust settled, he got to work on something that mattered to him, helping kids who grew up like he did, overlooked, angry, and out of options. In 1957, right in the heart of San Diego, he founded the Anybody Can Youth Foundation. It wasn't just a boxing gym. It was Moore's answer to a life full of hard knocks. He showed up in person, taught classes himself, and built a space where kids learned how to take hits and how to rise inside and outside the ring. Boxing got them in the door, but Moore's real mission was bigger. He talked to the kids about discipline, about keeping their heads down and working hard, and about not letting circumstances decide who they could become. He gave them academics, structure, purpose, and maybe most important of all, belief. For a lot of them, he was the first adult who believed they could be something more. Moore's reach didn't end with his foundation. He understood something most people miss. Legacy isn't just built on words. It's built on what people see you do. In the 1960s, he stood quietly alongside leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. He wasn't marching or giving speeches, but he was there, listening, learning, and standing with them when it mattered. His presence in those circles gave him credibility, especially with young people who saw him as living proof that you could fight for something bigger than yourself. And he used his story to do just that. He also knew how to use it to change the conversation. Moore was a natural storyteller. He could hold a crowd with tales from his boxing days or lessons he'd picked up along the way. He didn't hide his past, but he didn't glorify it either. He spoke about growth, discipline, and redemption. He became a mentor not just to the kids in his gym, but to anyone who needed to hear that your worst mistakes didn't have to be your final chapter. Moore's reinvention played out in other ways too. He took his reputation and turned it into something new, landing a major acting role as Jim in the 1960 film adaptation of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. It wasn't a gimmick or a cameo. He brought real heart to the role, proving he was more than just a fighter. He took other acting gigs over the years, using his presence and name to stay in the public eye and remind people that Archie Moore could play any role, in or out of the ring. But boxing was always home. He trained rising fighters, most famously George Foreman, before he became a legend himself. He even coached Nigeria's Olympic team, sharing his knowledge on a global stage. If there was a ring nearby, Moore was in it or beside it, always teaching, always giving, always trying to shape someone else's story into something better than his own. Recognition followed. Cities gave him keys. Magazines named him Man of the Year. And the boxing world honored him with awards. From the Rocky Marciano Memorial Trophy to a spot in the St. Louis Boxing Hall of Fame. These accolades didn't erase the past, but they added new chapters to his story, ones about service, leadership, and second chances. But not everything could be rewritten. Even as Moore rebuilt his image, the rumors never stopped. The foundation, the acting, the trophies, they helped, but they couldn't silence the questions. Whispers lingered, stories resurfaced. People still wondered how much of Archie Moore's life had been lived in the shadows. His legacy was being celebrated, but the truth was still waiting for its turn. Archie Moore's legacy stands at the crossroads of greatness and contradiction. He never let the odds define him. With 131 knockouts, a career spanning nearly 3 decades, and the longest light heavyweight reign in boxing history, Moore didn't just endure, he dominated. His name still echoes through gyms and rings around the world, and for good reason. He outlasted his era, reinvented himself time and again, and proved that resilience wasn't just a trait, it was his entire game plan. But for every headline about his victories, there's a shadow that stretches just as far. After his death in San Diego in 1998, the tributes poured in, and so did the questions. Paternity claims surfaced, some from people who had never met him but shared his name or his features. The truth about his personal life, how many families he'd built, how many children he'd fathered, remains murky. Even those closest to him were left connecting dots he never wanted revealed. Archie Moore was a master of defense, in the ring and in life. But some punches land long after the final bell. It's easy to let the numbers speak for Archie Moore. And why not? The record is untouchable. He fought legends and unknown killers alike, adjusted to every style, every era, and made the ring his home. While mid-century America closed doors on black fighters, Moore refused to fold. He took fights overseas. He waited 17 years for a title shot, then held that belt like he'd never let go. He didn't just survive the system, he outsmarted it. And when his moment finally came, he showed the world what it meant to wait your turn, and then take everything. But Moore's story didn't end with the final bell. The man outside the ring was just as complex, maybe more so. He became a mentor, shaping the minds of fighters like even Muhammad Ali. Archie Moore was more than a fighter. He was a survivor, a myth maker, a contradiction, and a man who tried, in the end, to give more than he took. To this day, fans, friends, and family wrestle with the same question. Can you separate the fighter from the father? The public hero from the private man? Or does one always bleed into the other, no matter how hard you try to draw the line? Archie Moore's life proves that greatness and imperfection can live side by side. His achievements are set in stone. But the unanswered questions? They keep his name alive in a different way. Through whispers, debates, and disbelief. You can't talk about Archie Moore without talking about both sides. He was a legend in the ring, and a mystery outside of it. Maybe that's why his story still matters. So how do you honor the warrior? When the man behind the gloves refused to be tamed? We want to hear your thoughts, so let us know in the comments below. Because greatness often comes with a price, and sometimes secrets are the heaviest weight of all. If Moore's story surprised you, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so we can continue to make videos like this for you in the future. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.